Ladies and gentlemen, ass kickers of all ages, hello again and welcome to the Fairly KickAss podcast, the only podcast. 2021 marks the 50th birthday of notable and notorious hip-hop icon Tupac Shakur. As we are a podcast that is, well, actually about our own need to feel superior to each other, but ostensibly it's about music. As such, we would be so remiss as to warrant forced retirement if we didn't make an effort to highlight such an accomplished and influential MC, activist, and cultural phenomenon as Tupac Shakur. In the year that marks his 50th birthday and the 25th anniversary of his untimely but unfortunately very predictable murder. I'm Jay, and I'm very excited to be having this discussion today. We've wanted to do this for a long time, and I'm sure that my crew here is just as excited. Zach, Dan, how are you feeling?
Feeling really good, man. As we sit here and record this, it's actually the day after what would have been Tupac's 50th birthday. And I'm glad you pointed this out too, Jay, that we are here at Fairly KickAss, one of the podcasts that you will find on the internet. And we are so grateful that we get the opportunity to commemorate such a legend, such as the great Tupac Shakur.
Indeed. Dan?
Yes.
Present.
Oh, this is
Am I going to add anything
already.
behind that? No, not at all.
All right, fine. Today's story starts in East Harlem, 1971, June 16th, as Zach pointed out just a moment ago, if we're being precise. Billy Garland and Alice Faye Williams produce an heir to the Black Panther Party, Lassane Parrish Crooks, as he was known at birth, held his birth name for almost exactly 1 year before it was changed to Tupac Amaru II, named after and claimed to be the descendant of the last Incan ruler, who would be the first of that name. His mom also changed her name to Afeni Shakur. I think she did that before he was born, but Afeni is a Yoruba word meaning lover of people, and Shakur is an Arabic word meaning thankful. When she was about 8 months pregnant, she was standing trial as a member of the Panther 21, which is a group of Panthers accused of carrying out bomb and long-range rifle attacks against police stations in New York City. His stepfather, Mutulu Shakur, had spent 4 years on the FBI most wanted list for an armed robbery of a Brinks truck that resulted in the death of a security guard and 2 police officers. His godfather, Elmer Geronimo Pratt, was convicted for the murder of a schoolteacher in 1968. A conviction, by the way, that was overturned later when it was revealed that he was 400 miles away at the time of the murder. Extrapolating from future events, things that would happen down the line, I posit that the tale of this event, his godfather, was one of the more impactful messages in young Tupac's life, as the injustice of being incarcerated for something that you could not possibly have done. And that tends to be sort of a theme in his poetry and in his messages. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
1984, he's about 13 years old, and he moves to Baltimore, where he becomes something of a Renaissance man. Attending the Baltimore School for the Arts for the last 2 years of high school, he studied poetry, jazz, theater, even ballet. He played the Mouse King in the Nutcracker, as well as taking roles in Shakespearean productions. Tupac was known for his sense of humor and his ability to wow folks by winning rap competitions alongside his beatbox buddy, Stretch. Who we'll talk about later as well.
Yes, we will.
He stated in an interview in the LA Times that he drew parallels between Shakespeare's work and the way gang warfare plays out.
Listeners, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off,
fine.
but just dissect that sentence. The fact that, we're at a time where we're talking about hypermasculinity just running rampant in the music industry in general, and also especially in the hip hop industry.
Yes.
And you have this young man who is taking theater classes and talking about Shakespeare. At the time, that didn't happen. Like, this was just so revolutionary that, I mean, even today, I don't think it would really be anything expected, but that's just all I wanted to point out, just how much of a juxtaposition and an enigma he was, even as a child, as a kid.
Yeah. I mean, imagine any, hip hop guru or just even whatever low level hip hop icon studying ballet.
Yeah, there's no way. You'd end up on that Summer Jam screen. Because who did you... Never mind. That's a different episode.
All right. So there's a biography of Tupac by Kerry Golis. It's just called Tupac Shakur. And I got a lot of information there. There's a lot of good information in that book. It was a good read, but it does take painstaking efforts to explain that Tupac listened to Sinead O'Connor and U2. And he did. He listened to everything. He wasn't, there was no like straight line of, I'm hardcore hip hop. I'm listening to hip hop. I love hip hop. He loved music. He loved everything. And that comes out in stuff that he does down the road as well. But there's definitely in this biography, there's a slant to the way it's written. It's hard to describe what I mean by that, but like you can tell that it almost feels like she's constantly saying things like, he's not who you think he is. He's this other thing. Making great efforts to inform people he's not just a rapper, which is true. He's not just a rapper.
Right. He was so much.
Right. Okay. So while he was at the School for the Arts in Baltimore, one of his best friends was like Jada Pinkett, and she talks a lot about him after his death. He also joined up with the Young Communist League and even dated the daughter of the director of the U.S. Communist Party. At age 17 in 1988, he moves away from Baltimore. And everything up to this point, like, it really is like rapid fire. We don't learn a lot about his early childhood. It seems to be, pretty straightforward. He went to school. He did well in school. He liked school. He had lots of friends. He was a good street rapper, and all this tracks. In 88, he moved to a small town north of San Francisco called Marin City. And it appears that Marin City is sort of the valley portion in the Hill Valley story of Marin County. It's the impoverished area as compared to like the other side of town where the Debbies live.
Shout out to the Oblongs.
But this is a relatively quiet time for Pac. Now we get into the music. When the music starts is when things start to get a little more interesting for him. His first appearance on a large scale is in 1991. He gets featured on the Digital Underground tune Same Song, and that gets placed in the film Nothing But Trouble. Dan Aykroyd vehicle. Interesting and oddly great movie. And the song also gets placed on the EP. This is an EP release by the Digital Underground.
What a title, man.
Right? Tupac's first album would come out later that same year, Tupacalypse Now. The album benefited heavily from his association with Shock G of Digital Underground, and especially G's appearance on the lead single, Trapped. The album as a whole was something of a tirade against social injustice. In it, he takes on everything from police brutality to politics to teenage pregnancy, and oh yeah, the big R, racism, the ever-present theme in a lot of his music, the important theme in a lot of his music.
Yes, yeah, it still is too.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about that album.
So, and you mentioned Shock, and I think, I think you hit the nail on the head kind of first and foremost that it cannot be understated how important Shock G was in at least the initial popularity of Tupac Shakur. I'm certainly not going to sit here and say that Tupac owes his career to Shock G or anything like that, but it's certainly possible that if not for Shock G, we're not having this conversation. Like, how devastating would it be? And we wouldn't even know it if one of the most influential voices, and I'm not even going to say music voices, one of the influential voices, full stop, never came to light because he never had a chance to be successful and he never had that that Shock really gave him.
Yes, so thank you to the Digital Underground, and especially Mr. Shock G.
Yes, indeed. And another late great in his own right.
Yeah.
Outside of just, helping to launch Tupac's career. But as far as the album itself, if it's okay with you guys, I would like to start off by quoting former Vice President Dan Quayle regarding this album, who said, quote, "There's no reason for a record like this to be released. It has no place in our society." And if I can very quickly quote a rebuttal from Fairly KickAss member Zach, quote, "Eat the fattest dick that you can find, Dan Quayle," end quote. Because this is one of the most important pieces of media in the last 30 years, not just because it was the genesis of Tupac Shakur, but in and of itself, in a vacuum, this was a very poignant album, a very prescient album. an album that was talking about things that no one else was really talking about, and certainly not to the level of eloquence that Tupac was talking about them. Jay mentioned the big R, racism, of course, being a ever-present theme, and there is no leaning into it. There's no working into a lather. It is go from song one, track one. From Young Black Male forward, there's no slowing down. It's fifth gear immediately. And that to me was about this album. The most impressive part was that, you know, he knew who he was from day one. And his goal was to basically to tell us who he was, you know, and through his work, through his music, through his later on, through his acting, his poetry, who he was to him. That was never in question.
Right.
So, yeah, the only other thing I wanted to point out here was the production on this album. Shout out to Dion Evans, aka Big D the Impossible, who does feature a little bit on the second album, but features very heavily from a production standpoint on Tupacalypse Now, and to great effect. The beats are appropriately muddy for the time, but there are some beats that are, you know, that are pretty unique for, especially for the early 90s, that you weren't hearing on other hip hop albums. So shout out to Big D there. Dan, as far as your take on the songs on Tupacalypse Now, what were your thoughts?
Well, that was going to be my first observation, actually, is when you mentioned the production and how it was, I guess unrefined might be the best description of it. And as you go forward, obviously, that would pick up. But yeah, it's to me, production-wise, it felt like there was a lot of potential here that it was just untapped, that as you go forward through his career is fully realized. One of the things I know Jay mentioned, talking about, well, that's the wrong album. There we go. The standout here talked about things that weren't talked about at the time. And Brenda's Got a Baby is the standout for that one. It is the first of so many of Pac's tracks that would hit like a socially conscious hammer on the American consciousness. I mean, the story of a poor young woman, how this teenager having a child has affected not only her life, but the community around her. And it's a tragedy set to a backbeat. Did you want to draw that Shakespearean comparison right there, right off the bat? Indeed. It's immediately obvious. And then this just wraps up with those closing vocals, and it just kind of feels like the song for the end credits of a short and extremely sad movie. And in something that could be said over many, many of his tracks, few artists have been able to convey emotions of reality and of a hard life like Pac.
Agreed.
And a bit of a flip in a surprising track for a deeper cut, if you wanted to look at that, I'd go to one song before on the album, and If My Homie Calls, and it's more of an ode to friendship with a very, very Humpty Dance feeling beat.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's an anthem for backing your boys up that were on your side.
Yeah, what I noticed on the record as far as like sound and tone and is just how much influence he took from like Digital Underground and from Ice Cube.
Oh yeah.
The anger from Ice Cube and the style from Digital Underground.
Like you just named the perfect rapper, right?
Right. Well, that's Tupac. That's what we just said.
Exactly.
Well, as Zach, as you mentioned, there was a little bit of controversy for this album regarding Vice President Dan Quayle. That stems from in 92, a man named Ronald Ray Howard murdered a police officer after a routine traffic stop. He was being pulled over for a broken headlight, and the officer wound up shot. I don't know how it came out in the report, but the song that Howard was listening to in the car was Soulja Story. That was what was coming out of his speakers. His defense attorney used that argument. Now, you know, that argument that the music made me do it.
How could he not? He was listening to the song. It was the song's fault.
And so he was listening to this song about, you know, killing police officers, and that Tupac had conditioned him to want this police officer dead. Now, it's not the first time this argument was used, but it is the first one that I remember, as I was about 10 or 11 years old when this happened. I remember Dan Quayle's comments about this music not needing to exist, and Tupac responded to that, actually. He said, I just wanted to rap about things that affected young black males. And when I said that, I didn't know I was going to tie myself down to just take all the blunts and hits for all the young black males to be the media's kicking post for young black males. But he wore that mantle. I mean, he didn't ask for it. I mean, maybe because he was so outspoken and didn't cower at the time, I think that's why he wound up bearing all of the hits for the plight of the young black male in the early 90s. But he wore that mantle pretty well, and he would wear it for several years.
I think that he was an easy target for a lot of folks in the media and a lot of folks in, higher forms of government, Congress people, obviously vice presidents, because he was there, because he was visible, and because in the past, there, at least to that level, there wasn't really a person who was able to just seemingly intelligently, fight back and say, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I was doing. This is, and this is what you're doing to me and what you're doing to the community. Certainly there have been many, many intellectual folks in hip hop since the dawn of hip hop, but very few that were able to articulate things in such a way that Tupac Shakur could. And I think that was intimidating to a great many people. His oratory skills were phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Vice President's statement was very simple, right? You said, you read the whole thing. You said, that has no place in our society. Well, that message was just as simple, especially to those who were actually listening to Tupac's lyrics. And this album, Tupacalypse Now, had reached number 64 on the Billboard charts. It took about 4 years for it to reach gold status. So not a very high selling record in his pantheon. It has now sold about 1.3 million copies. The themes and words on the album are just as relevant today as they were 30 years ago, and that's sad.
That's super sad.
92-ish is also the year that it became public knowledge that Tupac carried a Colt Mustang 38. That became public knowledge during an outdoor festival that he was performing at. According to the police reports, he was signing autographs after the show. This was a festival in Marin City, where he lived. And he was signing autographs, and there was some sort of scuffle that occurred. And I guess to help break it up, Tupac pulled his weapon, but he dropped it. He claims, his claim in the police report is that another person picked it up and it went off. Now, his stepbrother was arrested for it, but no charges were filed. The tragedy here is that Kaid Walker Teal, who was a 6-year-old on his bike, happened to be in the schoolyard neighboring the backstage area of this festival, and he was fatally shot in the forehead. Again, no charges were filed on this. There was so much confusion and he said, she said kind of stuff back there that nobody was able to make heads or tails about what actually happened. Right. A few years later, the child's mom would file a wrongful death suit against Shakur, and he would settle that outside of court. It was somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000, but we don't know exactly how much it was. And unfortunately, this incident gave officials even more ammo to argue against the music. So what do you imagine happens next? Does he make his next work more accessible to Pebble Beach?
Probably not. If I had to venture a guess.
He doubles the hell down. Released in February of 1993. I'm going to shorten this title to Strictly because I don't feel comfortable saying the full title. So Strictly had a vinyl release that labeled tracks 1 through 8 as the black side and the remainder of the tracks as the dark side. On the record, he collaborates with the primary scribe of Fuck the Police, Ice Cube, and Cop Killa MC, Ice-T. Backing down at all from this whole Cop Killa thing?
Not a lick.
Not even a little bit. Others joining him on the record are Tretch of Naughty by Nature, Apache Peaks, as well as Shock G and Money B of the Digital Underground. There's a handful of others that join him on the record. Those are just the most noticeable ones. With all of this militant and warranted outrage on the record, it's interesting to remember that the track about how good at sex Tupac and Shock G are is the tune that opens at number 11 on the pop charts.
And it is a good ass song.
No denying that. I was at least Keep Your Head Up is the follow-up single. So there's a little bit of levity or balance there. What do you guys think? You talk.
Man, like you said, this is a vicious album. I think Doubling Down's is the best way to put it. There was, knowing what we know about Tupac now, there was no shot that he was ever going to back down from, especially when engaged in such a way, that gave him motivation to really bring it even more fiercely than he did on Tupacalypse Now. The title that Jeremy was mentioning is actually an acronym, which stands for Never Ignorant in Getting Goals Accomplished. In case you all were wondering what that word is. Of course you know what it is, but just in case there's someone who wasn't 100% sure, yeah, you'll see it in Spotify. You'll see the album title. It'll be right there. To me, it was, like I said, just a continuation of the same themes from Tupacalypse Now, but just a stronger verbiage regarding those themes, more polished, I feel, from a studio perspective, especially in Pac's delivery. I thought was the thing that jumps out to me most here. Still incredibly hard for sure, but more, you start to hear some of the nuance really entering his delivery and some of the writing as well. There are some slower songs. There are some songs where he himself is delivering slower to make sure that his point is properly emphasized. I feel like he's maybe starting to, or continuing to understand the influence of his words, and that he wants to make sure that his story is told as completely as it possibly can be. And part of it is just repetition. I'm sure just being in the studio more, working with talented producers more, is really helping him kind of find that untapped potential that Dan had mentioned in regards to Tupacalypse Now. Only peaked at number 4 on the charts, and that is on the R&B charts.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the top 200, it peaked at number 24. So we're still at the point here where not a lot of people really know Tupac Shakur. He's not a household name yet. He will be soon.
Yeah, very soon.
But Dan, so what did you think? Did you feel that this was the peak at number 24 album that it reached on the charts, or did you think it was something that cut above?
Oh, it was definitely a cut above. I mean, there's no 24 should not have been as high as it got. And you made the perfect point that I kept hitting again and again at each track, is that you feel he's learning how to put the he's properly inflecting his words so that there's no question about his message. And that is not only, it's taking away all that nuance across from his meaning. The standout, as you mentioned, was the second single, Keep Your Head Up. Again, it's a track in the middle of this devastatingly hard album. And I don't mean like difficult, just hard. Impact. And then you get the song in the middle that's been called the definitive ode to the black woman, especially in a genre that doesn't have the best track record regarding its treatment of women, especially at this point in hip hop's history. And it exposes that struggle that women in the community have faced. And instead of objectifying them like the rest of his peers, it praises them for their strength. And it praises them for carrying on. And like just the sample of the 5 Stair Steps classic Ooh Child just wraps this jam up in a tight bow right there in the chorus. But if you want to go a little deeper,
oh, I do.
Go all the way to the last track on the record. It's a fire posse cut in 5 Deadly Venoms, featuring Treach, featuring Apache, and the Live Squad. And it's just, I don't know how you read it, but it felt like a West Coast take on a Wu-Tang track. Not like a knockoff or a pastiche, but taking a formula and putting their own style and spin on it.
I could see that.
And again, fire.
Yeah.
All the fire.
Yeah. All the fire. That is a really great track.
Yeah.
I'm playing it in my head right now.
Right. Like I said, it was kind of one of those, as you're flipping through and get to the very end of the record, like, oh, they saved some gold to close this.
And it highlights some of the collaboration that Pac had even in Tupacalypse Now with Live Squad, and especially with Stretch.
Yeah. Well, to date, well, actually, as of 2018, 1.6 million copies of Strictly have sold. And it is highly regarded as one of the best breakout albums by a hip hop artist. I don't know how you'd qualify that as whatever your arbitrary line of delineation for a breakout record is. This is one of the best. All right. So it's 1993 and Tupac is starting to do movies as well. He's done Juice.
Great film. If y'all haven't seen it, I know you two have, but listeners, if you guys haven't, watch it now. It's an amazing movie.
It's really good. And his character in that, Bishop, is taken from, his motivation for that role is taken from a real life person who gets mentioned in just a little while here. We're about 3 years away from talking about him. But he also stars alongside Janet Jackson in Poetic Justice. Not such a great movie.
Can't all be winners, right?
Well, I mean, no, I guess not. While we're here in this moment, do we want to talk about Thug Life Volume 1?
I think we should. That it's technically not a Tupac Shakur album, but it definitely is a Tupac Shakur album.
Yeah, it was a side hustle for him. Alongside Macadocious, Big Psych, Rated R, and his stepbrother, Mo Preem Shakur, who actually appeared on Strictly as The Wicked, something like that.
I think it was The Wicked, yeah.
And the original version of this record was completely scrapped because of all of that controversy regarding, gangsta rap being not okay. And it was under such public scrutiny that the labels decided, no, we're not going to do that. And they scrapped the whole original record, redid it with new songs. But being the rebel that he was, Tupac and Stretch performed the original planned single. It's called Out on Bail, and it was never actually released. So I don't know how you're going to find it. You might be able to find a performance from the Source Awards, which is where they did that. That's just who he is, man.
You're not going to tell Tupac Shakur no.
The actual single for the record is called Pour Out a Little Liquor. And that appeared on the soundtrack for Above the Rim, which is, an underrated movie. I absolutely love that movie. This group, Thug Life, actually spent most of its time performing without Tupac. They did a lot of their touring and stuff sans him. But the record itself is totally a Tupac record.
Yeah, it's Tupac with featured artist, right?
Do you have anything to add to that, Zach?
It almost, and we're talking about apples and oranges from a musical style. So listeners, don't take it the wrong way, them equating these two together in this way, but it did have a feeling of D12 in the sense that D12 was basically Eminem with some others.
Yeah, that hurt.
I know Jeremy's hurt because.
Oh.
Oh no. Was it because of Bizarre?
Yes.
Bizarre film. I figured that was going to be the one that really, like, it wasn't Proof. It was, man, you can shit on Proof all you want, but Bizarre, that's too far. That's too far. Yeah, this was an album for sure. It's unfortunate that we have such a high, well, it's not unfortunate. He kind of made us do it. He made us have such a high expectation of him. Tupac did. And perhaps the group aspect of this album did detract from it a little bit. Certainly, you could not have anyone else in the world that was going to be able to hold a candle to Tupac or even keep up with Tupac at his prime, which was his career. His whole career was his prime. And that was the case here. If this was completely, entirely a Tupac album without any of the other members of Thug Life, then it probably would have been better. I don't think this was quite as strong as Strictly 4. I don't think it was quite as socially relevant as Tupacalypse Now. In a vacuum, it was a fine album. I had no problem with it, but certainly, it was not, to me, it was not as strong as his previous two releases. But I've been wrong before, and will certainly be wrong again. So yeah, it's an album that we can probably agree on that was fine.
It's fine.
But yeah,
it's fine.
Nothing that we have to really drill into.
No, I would say that Pour Out a Little Liquor is probably a good choice for the lead single on the record. The next one I would choose, maybe How Long Will They Mourn Me, but that's because I rather enjoy Nate Dogg's voice. So, maybe. Not my favorite album. Let's move on.
Yeah.
1993 also saw a pretty drastic increase in Tupac's legal problems. This is the period of time that might have been the most, just the most extra part of Tupac's life. On one hand, he was enjoying fame and fortune. He doesn't really get to enjoy that fortune much, because there's also this pesky problem of government and public outcry against gangster rap. There's a few sexual assault charges going on at this time, and I don't want to gloss over those, but there's not a lot of information that's publicly available. Long story shortened to a bullet point, there was a woman who gave a consensual blowy and then returned the next day and was full on raped by either Tupac, some member of his cohort, or a combination. Tupac was convicted of first-degree sexual abuse.
Which, what happened, regardless of who was responsible, is absolutely heinous.
Absolutely.
It's certainly nothing that we're like Jay said, we're not glossing over that fact or
Not at
saying,
all.
well, Tupac was great, so it doesn't matter. No, if he was responsible, or even if he knew that this happened and didn't make any attempt to stop it or to inform anyone, then he's extremely heinous for that.
Absolutely. And the only reason that I don't want to go into more detail about that is because I literally can't. I could give the woman's name. I don't feel like that's important right now. That I have, but there's really not a lot of other things to discuss that's available. The next thing, he did about 10 days in jail alongside 35 hours of community service for hitting another rapper with a microphone and then a baseball bat at Michigan State University. That's a thing. He was fired from the cast of Menace to Society after he beat up the director. Something he was apparently very proud of, as he was laughing about it and bragging on Yo MTV Raps about how he beat up the director.
Oh, wow. Shout out Yo MTV Raps also, because there are going to be a lot of people listening to this who have no fucking idea what that is.
Come on, son.
Oh,
And that's sad. Just find it on YouTube, man. It was one of the best TV shows you'll ever watch in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or something.
I got nothing. Okay. And on top of all of these other things that was going on, there was that whole East Coast, West Coast rivalry thing jamming up the works. As he was working on his third full-length solo record, things were heating up in the legal arena and in the rivalry arena. In November 1994, Tupac was in New York City doing a recording with Ron G. His manager, Jimmy Henchman Rosamond, was continually beeping Tupac, offering him $7,000 to swing into Quad Studios in Times Square and drop some bars with Little Sean. Legal costs being what they are, Pac agrees. He arrives at the studio with Stretch and two others, and he was promptly held up at gunpoint. They fought back, because they ain't no punks, and Tupac was shot for the effort. Within a few months, accusations start pouring out, spurred on by the individuals that were involved. Tupac names his suspects in interviews. Obviously, he thinks he was set up by henchmen, but as Little Sean is friends with one Christopher Wallace...
Interesting.
Biggie and Puffy get name dropped as well. Oh, right, they actually happened to be at Quad Studios at the time.
Probably coincidence. Yes.
yeah,
Probably.
Yeah,
Sean, my guy, if you are listening, we're not necessarily saying anything at all.
More fuel.
But keep listening to the podcast.
Oh, more fuel. A few months after the incident, a mere couple of months after the incident, Biggie and Puffy release a song called Who Shot Ya?
Sean.
Listen, even conspiracy theorists don't like this shit. It's too easy.
Right. It's like a one-piece puzzle. Come on.
At most, you need a flowchart to keep track of who did what. At least a portion of this. First of all, nobody gets arrested for this. Like, it just ends. But at least a portion of it is proven in 2011 when a convicted murderer named Dexter Isaac confesses to being hired to perform the hit on Tupac and his crew. He names Jimmy Henchman as the purse. So That seems pretty cut and dried. There's a lot of ins and outs here, though. Suge Knight and Sean Combs going back and forth. Suge doing some backdoor legal thievery to acquire the rights to stuff that Sean Combs owns, for like Mary J. Blige recordings, Jodeci, a handful of others that Death Row kind of legally purchased without permission.
Isn't that funny how that works?
I don't know how it works. That sentence hurts my brain. So Suge Knight, that is, loses a bodyguard or several to bullets delivered by known friends of Combs outside the studios in New York City. To his credit, Puffy did attempt to de-escalate things at one point by lying. He was saying that like the dissing and stuff that was going on in Bad Boy Records things wasn't aimed at Death Row, but rather at Jermaine Dupri and So Def. Do you buy that?
How does this like make any of that better?
Well, Suge didn't buy it either, so it doesn't really matter.
I mean, okay. I mean, it's pretty transparent there.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how would you react to that?
No. In March of 1995, Me Against the World, the third record in Tupac's catalog, is released. It opens with nearly $250,000 in sales in the first week, making it the highest selling solo rap album at the time. Record holder. Dear Mama is the lead single, ranking as one of the most influential rap songs of all time. And the album ranks similarly, sometimes considered his crowning achievement as an artist. Not by everyone, but it is on a few of those types of lists. Discuss.
Man. So this was an absolute powerhouse album from a man who'd already produced 2 absolute powerhouse albums and Thug Life.
Damn.
I know, that's so cold. It felt bad. It did. And I kind of envision Pac at a bit of a crossroads, kind of coming into Me Against the World. Like, you know, he is starting to, you know, kind of experience the benefits of success. And of course, you know, as you were mentioning, Jay, some of the trappings of success too. But he at this point, I would say at this point in his career, he could be considered successful, very famous, certainly on his way to wealth. And still young, and you know, it's basically kind of the dream, right? But there still is a matter of being able to access the mainstream, being able to get that music and get those songs played in places where they normally wouldn't be. And he could have done that. He certainly could have just made, you know, kind of transitioned into a more mainstream sound and, you know, made gobs and gobs more cash. And we would still probably be sitting here considering him as one of the greatest of the 90s. Perhaps not one of the greatest full stop, but certainly one of the greatest of the 1990s. You know, everyone would be happy except for him. So yeah, that did not happen. The tracks on Me Against the World are certainly more popular than his first 2 albums, but they're by no means are they more mainstream. You know, there's still no watering down of anything. You know, this is still 100% Tupac in every sense of the word. And for my money, it might be Pac at his absolute most vulnerable. Jay mentioned Dear Mama is an extremely sweet, beautiful song about Afeni Shakur. Just a gorgeous song. Like, rappers didn't really talk about their mothers. Maybe not in a positive light, at least. But Pac certainly did. And yeah, it was awesome. You know, he went from love to loss and back again on this album. The album itself could serve as an autobiography for a man who we have to remember was 23 years old when Me Against the World was released. 23 and had already lived like 12 different lives, you know, in terms of everything that he'd done and seen and that's happened to him. He reflects on, you know, his journey to get to that point. He reflects not necessarily in the most glowing of terms on the music industry. He does reflect very glowingly on the musical pioneers that helped steer him to this point. And as a continual recurring theme, his own mortality certainly does factor in a number of places here. Dan, is it fair to say that this is the best Pac that we've seen, at least up until this point, in your eyes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And because of the thing that you guys had both mentioned about vulnerability in lyrics. And again, more examples of a man who is doing things in a genre that nobody's doing at this time. Like just writing on a groundbreaking level. And as you both have mentioned and raved about, the standout is obviously Dear Mama. It is one of the most emotional songs in, well, hip-hop history. An incredible ode to his mother. He doesn't sugarcoat anything about their turbulent relationship. He loves her despite their issues and their faults. It is raw and it is real. And many, many other critics have written far more thoughtful and insightful pieces on the track than I will ever be able to express here. But I will say that there's a clear reason why this song has been entered into the National Recording Registry in the Library of Congress.
And that's not easy to do.
If I read it correctly, it's only the third hip-hop track in there.
Wow.
It's like the hymn, a Public Enemy track, and I'm blanking on the third, but it's yeah. I'm sure that'll hopefully they'll add more going forward, but come on.
Yeah, I mean, that says it all right there. I mean, just the importance of such a track cannot be overstated.
But go a little deeper on this album and pull up Temptations. Again, another one of those just standout tracks that are different. A romantic jam that covers some of the less written about aspects of relationships, the need for companionship. You both mentioned the vulnerability that he displayed in this, and this is the perfect song, I think, to display that. The theme that, you know what, even thugs want to be with somebody sometimes. That's just that the hard exterior doesn't completely destroy the human emotions inside.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of both of those tracks. The whole album, like you said. It's thoroughly just amazing. To follow up on what you were saying a moment ago, there are 6 hip-hop tracks preserved at the Library of Congress.
Thank you.
Grandmaster Flash, The Message, Fear of a Black Planet, you mentioned Public Enemy, Dear Mama, De La Soul's 3 Feet and Rising, Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight, and Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation. Yeah.
It's a hell of a list.
Yeah, it is.
God.
It's still missing a lot, but it's a good list.
Certainly. It's a very good place to start.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so at the time of the release of Me Against the World, Tupac was serving his time for the sexual assault conviction. He was in the Clinton Correctional Facility from February to October of 1995. He gets let out in October on a $1.4 million bond posted by Suge Knight, who was in violation of a different court order by even visiting Tupac in prison. The condition of Pac's release, road cleanup, for which he didn't show up, and was subsequently sentenced to 120 days, which was suspended for unknown reasons. This is a mess. There's just a lot.
Guys, if you could see Jay's face. I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
No, go ahead, because I'm going to drive us even farther off the beaten path. It has nothing to do with anything we're conversing on, but so...
Well, then I will just say real quickly that if you guys and listeners could see Jay's face as he's shiftily looking off camera as he's saying that, it tells you everything you need to know. It's so good.
Yeah, there's a lot in this story that's actually a little bit hard to follow because it jumps around a lot. So as I'm remembering, I didn't take my notes are kind of scattered and I didn't write prose for everything that I'm about to say. And as such, it's a little bit broken, but it's pretty, you get to learn certain things and you know that Pac is going to be arrested for a thing. He's going to fight against the thing. He's going to be convicted of the thing, and he's going to ignore the repercussions of the thing. That's just sort of how it works. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I know if Dan, you still had something to say as well.
Oh, I mean, like I said, it had nothing to do with Tupac. I can take us off the rails if you wanted to. Since you mentioned he just didn't show up for community service, that exact thing is why in America we know nothing about Mark Morrison outside of Return of the Mac. He was sentenced to, he's English, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. He was sentenced to community service in England, went like twice, and then decided that was no fun. So he got someone else to go as him to serve the rest of his community service, which is when they finally said, all right, none of that, and you're going to jail, which is why he was never able to follow up Return of the Mac, and therefore never fulfilled the potential of the British New Jack Swing dynamo that he could have been.
Yeah.
That's such a boss move. I'm sorry. That's such a boss move.
Right? Not just to skip, but to decide, yeah, you know what? Forget it. This guy kind of looks like me. You go do it. Pay somebody else to do your community service. Nothing to do with anything. Probably going to be cut. Just you said a thing, and it reminded me of the thing.
I love it.
I don't think we can cut that.
No, that's perfect. That's great. All right, so we are up against the clock here and how long this is taking. So I think this is a good place for us to pause and invite our listeners to come back and listen to part 2 of our deep dive into Tupac Shakur, which will be out here shortly. In the meantime, check out our website, fairlykickass.com. Hit us up on Twitter at fairlykickass, and email us fairlykickass@gmail.com. And keep listening to the back catalog of stuff that's here already on Spotify, ready for you to ingest and enjoy or make fun of. Mostly make fun of. So yeah, come back here soon, and you'll hear the rest of this deep dive into Tupac Shakur on Fairly Kick-Ass, the podcast.